What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Adrenaline and Instinct. We are here January 1. Today's episode is going to be a bit of a personal one. I want to reflect back on some of my 2025 goals and share some lessons, some thoughts, some things that I've learned along that path, and then look ahead towards 2026. And I want to share some of the goals that I have set because I think putting them out there is just going to hold me accountable. And that's something I want to do. So, without further ado, my 2025 goals list, and then we'll kind of start. All right. Sorry to take you away from the episode quick, but I want to tell you about an app that is actually the first sponsor of the channel, and one of my good buddies, Dustin Frost, is designing and running this sucker. But I want to take a minute to tell you about Ride Loud. So Ride Loud's a mobile app designed for outdoor adventure enthusiasts, offering tools to plan, manage, and share rides while prioritizing safety and social connection. It combines event scheduling, social networking, and safety features into one platform. Guys, you should head over to the App Store and give this sucker a download as soon as you can. It's an amazing app and it's run by amazing people. All right, let's get back to the episode. Was get married. I wanted to build a home in the Idaho mountains. I wanted to start a podcast. And then I wanted to find balance with work. Now, to start, a couple of those wasn't necessarily like an issue of getting a yes or moving forward. It was a lot more of the planning, actually seeing to it that it happened. So for the first, so getting married, I was able to accomplish that. So me and my wife got married in June, which was a amazing feat. We got married actually just, I don't know, a couple miles behind our house here and up in the mountains. It was gorgeous. It was beautiful. But, one of the things that I've chatted with a couple times, I think on the pod, but just in general, I think with people like myself that are into action sports, into adrenaline, I think oftentimes are kind of scared to commit. Scared to commit to marriage, scared to commit to those kinds of personal things. Obviously we don't have an issue committing to things that solicit adrenaline, but oftentimes I've found that, folks in this field generally get married either rather late or, Lord forbid, go through a few marriages through on the way. So for me, I kind of had a moment where I had to sit down, just with myself and really just talk about, what I wanted with my life. And for me, it was, find a gal that understands the life that I'm living and that I'm not, swaying away from weekend rides and doing all sorts of crazy things that I probably shouldn't be doing. But I needed somebody that understood that, but I also needed balance. I didn't want somebody that was just going to be kind of jumping along and almost adding fuel to the fire. I wanted somebody that was going to be coming along that was kind of more or less the rock that, I can go do these things, but we have something that we're building together. And, that was something I found in my wife, but, it also took us about 8 years before we actually got the job done and put a ring on that thing. So that was one where, it's an interesting concept with, I think, folks in action sports, but it's a real one. And I think it's worth the conversation with yourself around, what do you actually want from a partner? And are they checking the boxes? And then even sometimes more importantly, are you able to check the boxes for that person? Because I know my wife kind of went through the same checklists, and hers were different than mine, but in a way, we wanted to make sure that, we were here to complement each other's lives and make it better as a unit versus coming together and then making things difficult because we can't do the things we want to do. The second, building a home in the Idaho mountains. This is another check mark. This one took a lot of planning, almost a couple years in the making. So a little backstory on myself. So moving, from Wisconsin out west, you kind of got to pay to play out here. It's not, you definitely aren't finding those, $150,000 starter homes. I wish that was the case, but those are few and far between and almost long gone at this point, especially in the Northwest. So coming over, I kind of caught an amazing COVID bubble in Idaho where we were moving over from Issaquah, Washington. This is when they shut all the trails down. Things got super weird over there. And I had came to Coeur d'Alene and found that, hey, we can ride dirt bikes. We can go to get dinner without having to worry about our temperature getting taken. And kind of that sense of freedom, really captured me. And I think we moved, a week after that first visit. But in that week of time, I was getting in contact with a couple realtors, and basically the story behind it all was you're going to be playing ball with a lot of other people that also want to buy. And I think we came over again within that week time frame and toured, I think it was close to 15 homes. And the funny part is touring, the 15 homes, there was really only one that we saw and we're like, this would be a great starter home. I think we were 25 at the time. And luckily my wife and I both, take our careers very seriously. So, we did have some stashed away, but at the same time, it was, this was more money than we've ever spent in our entire lives at that time. And hindsight, I wish we would have went in even deeper, but we did what we were comfortable with and something that wasn't going to put us into a hole if things went south. And we ended up doing a tour of this home. We put an offer in, and we miraculously were the only offer that was given when this market was supposed to be absolutely crazy. And I think partially there was a little bit of the big man upstairs looking down on us and definitely granting us some favor there. But it was just a weird one. I think there were so many people that were kind of thinking they were going to be in the same boat where they were going to submit an offer and then get outbid, that a lot of folks didn't even submit that offer. And the nice thing was this house was, on a nice quiet neighborhood. It wasn't very big. I think it was 1,200 square foot. But it had everything you ever need for a starter home. It didn't need a single thing. The gal that owned it before us took really good care of it. And the funny part is we got in, I'm sitting there doing, wheelies on the street on my dirt bike or, wrenching on shit and starting engines up at all sorts of hours. And my neighbors were totally cool. We weren't in an HOA or anything like that, which is awesome. And it was just something where I had never lived in, kind of a subdivision before. My wife had never lived in a subdivision. And growing up in Wisconsin, we were both kind of used to having, I guess, more or less a buffer between you and your neighbors. And don't get me wrong, love my neighbors, but I also don't want to see them all the time. So with that being said, we kind of knew that eventually we would really like to move somewhere where we had a little bit of acreage. We knew that was going to come with some sacrifices. And what we ended up kind of landing on at the time was we found a shop that was about 30 minutes east of Coeur d'Alene. So, if you're familiar with the Silver Kings, Hard Enduro, Kellogg, Idaho, we're, I would say, about 10 minutes west of that. So kind of right in between the Coeur d'Alene, Kellogg area. And I mean, beautiful mountains. I would say over here, it's kind of still a growing area. You have some, really nice places, but also mixed in with, places that have been here for 30 plus years. But it offers, in my opinion, such a better way of life, where I'm able to ride a dirt bike from my house and go access millions of acres of private or public land, and have hard enduro loops close to the house. Don't even have to load up anymore. You can do kind of these bigger epic rides, and it's it's just something that I had always dreamed of doing. But with the sacrifice that I had alluded to, me and my wife were living in a pretty much an apartment in the shop for 2 years while we had saved up to be able to finally afford to start construction on our actual home. Now, on paper, that doesn't sound bad. However, two dogs having I think it's around an 850 square foot living space. We had a kind of um a nice master bedroom. It was big. It was kind of split level. So half the shop was built out into these living quarters. And then we had a downstairs, which was the kitchen, bath, living room. And then upstairs was a half bath and then the living quarters. I'm actually sitting right now in what was our old master bedroom. And this was fine. However, two dogs in this kind of environment, it's like things get hairy, things get close and cramped. And, the way we had to build it, we actually had to walk out into the unfinished shop portion to get up to the master. So you're kind of always dealing in the winter, going out, getting freezing, walking upstairs. Luckily, we had, 2 mini splits. So once you got into the living areas, everything was fine and good. But I will say that we had a couple nights where it got, negative 20, some kind of Wisconsin Midwest style colds. And it got to the point where like we had heating pads on us, like just to keep us somewhat warm. The shops are never built that well, so things are able to get through, wind's able to get through some ways. And it's that was one where we were just kind of looking at each other like, how long until we can get the hell out of this thing? If it was just me and her, I think we probably could have lasted quite a bit longer. With the two dogs, things got a little hairier, and we were about ready to we were about ready to get out of there after the 2 years. But we knew this was kind of the price we had to pay to be where we wanted. And we were luckily able to actually keep the Post Falls house, so that our first home that we built, keep that rented out over the course of those 2 years, which was great. I mean, we had kind of COVID level interest rates and things were really good over there. But we also knew that we financially couldn't afford to keep it and build kind of our dream home, if you will. And so long story short with that, we ended up keeping it up until kind of the last point. The last one gave me such a bad taste with renters. They started out awesome. We're paying their bills, and then they broke up. And, the guy that wanted to stay was not at all qualified for the actual rent monthly. His take home after a month was almost what the rent was. And it's not like we were charging anything crazy, but he was kind of like, I'll find a sublet, get more people in here. And I'm just like, let's just cut our losses. We'll call it good. You don't have to pay, the next 2 months, just find another place, kind of even wash. I looked at that as like, this is a perfect sign that I'm ready to let this place go. And it was a great home. In the years we owned it, which I think was close to 4.5, we did not have to do a single thing to it. And when we sold it, I would say it was about 5 to 6 years away from needing a roof. It probably could have used a couple updates throughout, but it was still a pretty sound home. And I think whoever had bought it, they ended up getting a pretty great starter home for the cost and a good neighborhood. So I felt confident and cool with that. But when we sold it, of course, when we were able to get in, this area was growing rapidly, and we were able to take the proceeds from the home and be able to put that into kind of the building of our house up here, which the beauty of that was kind of part of the entire plan. And I'll get into some of the kind of the methods behind the madness, I guess, of making some of these goals and making them achievable. But this one was kind of a long-term, over, I don't know, maybe 3-year goal that just took kind of these incremental dominoes to fall when they needed to. with a gentle nudge to be able to afford to build. And all of those dominoes, fell as they needed. We actually hit a little bit of a housing lull. And luckily I sold before that and was able to take the proceeds, put them towards the home into furnishings. And that was pretty much the only way that my wife and I were able to afford to kind of get moving on that build. And we still had to I wouldn't say cut corners, but we weren't able to go as extravagant as I think we would have totally wanted to. We really let the budget decide what we could and couldn't do. But long story short with that, we were able to get a around 800 or 1,800 square foot home kind of up on this mountain, perched with a nice, gorgeous back deck. I'll put some pictures on Instagram or my TikTok if you follow me on there, and you'll be able to see it's kind of this awesome pieced out place. There's still a lot of work that has to get done on the exterior. So this thing went up, I think we started in May. We broke ground and then we were finished by middle of November. So the builder that we went with, Adair Homes out of Spokane, actually did a pretty great job with it. I'm not going to lie. And there's probably some things I could totally nitpick, but for the most part, they did a pretty great job. They had people in like clockwork going through. And then because our home was kind of so far out in the country, I think the attention to detail was quite a bit better. Us living on the property, I think also we had a set of eyes that were kind of there and able to catch, little things that might have had an issue. But, at the same time, they were happy that we were there and able to keep an eye on when maybe the GC or general contractor was out, every week, where we were there every day. So with that being said, we were able to kind of get the house that we had always dreamed of, but it took all of these kind of dominoes and other, I would say, yearly goals to actually achieve that. And as of middle of November, we can check that one off the list and move on. We achieved it. That was probably the biggest one. That's what, little Ty had always dreamed about. And we're just elated that we were able to make something like that happen. The next goal that I had going into 25 was I wanted to start this podcast. And I didn't really know where to start. I luckily have some awesome friends like David McKinney, Tristan over at 509. Like there's some great people that had given me a ton of insight. Cam Hotchkiss, who was, I think, episode 2 or 3. They kind of live in this space, and in the media production side of power sports. And it was really good. I don't know why I didn't say Tristan's last name, Tristan Gallagher, but they live in this media side of the action sports world and are able to at least point me in the direction of like what equipment I needed. What did I need to kind of get and front load to make sure that things were, as good as they could be without blowing the bank on something I did or didn't know was going to, either catch anyone's eyes or ears, or B, if it was something I was even good at or wanted to keep doing or having fun with. So they were a massive help. And with that, though, we definitely had some complications, like if you go back and listen to the catalog, I think it's like episode 1 through 9. What the audio it's listenable, but it's nowhere near as crisp as the last, I think, 4 episodes were. And that was mainly due to, an audio board that wasn't paired beautifully with the mic that I'm using. And that, definitely crisped things up. And now I think we're able to see, a much better product, which I'm super excited for. The other would be scheduling of guests. Believe it or not, action sports and power sports athletes and folks in the industry are extremely busy, which always makes it really hard to kind of deliver a cadence. But at that same token, I think going into 26, I learned some things with that of, really just needing to produce a catalog of unpublished episodes where I can, get 10 or 12 ahead of what I'm releasing. So I always have that next one to release to stay as consistent as possible. And I think we had a couple really good months in there. And then I think we also had some that fell off. I also think figuring out some more content that's, just me delivering. So almost like this type of episode where I don't need to rely on anyone else. I can do the research and I can kind of bring it forth. So I think that's something that you're going to see kind of when I start covering my 26 goals of that. But ultimately, I think my goal was 10 episodes, and I was really hoping for around 500 listeners. And the amazing thing is we hit 13 episodes and we're at right around 950 monthly listeners. So again, that one blew my expectations out of the water, which is like a huge thanks to you guys that are actually doing the listening. And, with that, I would say, again, with you guys listening, I would love to know, like, what are topics you want me to cover? What are guests you would love for me to have on and have a good conversation with? I want this to be as kind of mutually beneficial to the listeners as it is me, because a lot of the folks I'm able to have on, I just genuinely enjoy talking to them, learning about their lives, learning about their way their mind thinks. So if that's something that you guys want, jump on Instagram, give me a follow, shoot me a message. My handle is at Adrenaline and Instinct. And then on TikTok, I believe it's at Adrenaline and Instinct Pod. And then you can also find me on YouTube at just Adrenaline and Instinct. So give me a follow on there. Again, we love the support, and I just want to keep making them if you guys want to keep listening. So I appreciate you allowing me to check that goal off the 2025 list. So it's not every year that I get to, check off almost all the goals that I set for myself in 2025. There is one other one that, as of today, I'm super stoked on, that I can check off the list as well. But at the beginning of 2025, my wife and I were both like, we're getting sick and tired of going out drinking, feeling like shit the next day. I didn't feel like it was conducive to doing anything positive for the time after. Even if you went to a happy hour, I felt like coming home after, I was just not interested in doing anything. I had bike work to do. I'll get it in the morning. So we vowed, and we didn't like make it a super hard, this has to be this, but we were both just kind of played out on the drinking scene, and we took it upon ourselves that, hey, let's just stop. Like, we don't need to do it. We can kind of make all these clauses and say, like, for special events, we can do this. But, we were just like, you know what? Like, it's not serving me in the way that something should, that I find positive, that I keep subjecting myself to. So me and my wife just ended up quitting cold turkey. And, it's not like we had problems with it. Being from Wisconsin, I think sometimes like the amount of booze that, one consumes that still thinks it's normal is probably very evident. But for us, it was just like, this isn't serving us. And I personally don't like, calling the phone, my wife's drunk, or her calling me and I'm drunk, and, having to kind of soberly reason with someone under the influence. And it in all honesty, the stopping of drinking ended up making our relationship, so mine and my wife's relationship, I would say tenfold better than it was. And it instilled so much trust in one another. And I think it also kind of just like equipped me with like the feeling of, dude, if you can just quit that and not give into the peer pressure and all the social sides of it. And trust me, we were in plenty of situations where, having a drink sounded great, with your buddies. I mean, one of my best friends' weddings, but at the same time, it was like around that 4-month mark of not doing it, you end up having this kind of weird shift mentally where it's like all of the things that before I wouldn't get nearly as much satisfaction or fun or that adrenaline rush from, or not adrenaline, but more of that dopamine hit from, just started becoming more fun. The highs aren't as high, as when you're kind of at that right in the pocket of feeling great and buzzing hard and all of that. It's like things are amazing, but then usually things turn pretty quickly thereafter. And it just started to kind of even out the day where it was like I was getting a lot of satisfaction and fun and dopamine from things that I didn't think I would get those from. And the highs weren't as crazy high, but like, man, like going to a wedding and still not drinking, but like dancing and just having a good time. Like it still was such a good time for me going to a bachelor party, being able to be the DD. But I think, and it also really helped that all of the buddies around really, like, they weren't pushing. They just kind of accepted it and were super supportive of it. And I think that's also one. So making sure you kind of had a good surrounding that likes you for you and not just likes you for your boozing. But that was another one that I gratefully can kind of check off the list of putting down the drink and doing life sober for 2025 and going into 26. So we're stoked. We don't have it's not like we're never going to do it again, or we're not putting that kind of heat on it. But as long as we feel this good, I don't think we're going to be picking it up anytime soon. So that's my cap on 2025, which I'm elated to share with you guys. And it's been it's just been such a fun 25. I think this year was just a hit, and I look forward to hopefully, being as productive in 26 as I was. So the next kind of segment of this is I want to get a little bit into like the science of goal setting. So I'm by no means qualified to be giving this. So I'm going to quote one of the folks that I follow pretty religiously, Andrew Huberman. So he's neuroscientist. The dude's extremely smart. He's, I think, maybe on the top 5th or 6th podcast, Huberman Labs. But he goes into kind of the mental side of goal setting and using our reward systems and kind of our mental chemistry to help set goals and make them more achievable. Because I think, again, time and time again, we set shit that we just never follow. And I'm not going to get into like, you need to do this, you need to do that. I'm going to kind of rifle through a few kind of key takeaways from some of the research that he's done and kind of share with you, which kind of helped how I structure my goal setting. And I would say it was a big proponent as to how I was able to hit some of those goals for last year. So to kind of start off, number one, so defining a specific goal. And he always talks about how clarity matters. Vague goals fail, but clarity matters. Your brain needs something to really picture. So for myself, like getting into the like building a home was like drawing out the floor plan of what we wanted to build. And then there's a lot of things that went into that, or for the podcast was almost creating a business plan behind, here's why I'm going to start it. Here's how we're going to execute on this. Here's the goals that I want to set for the year, for the first month, the second, third, fourth month, and then trying to hit those along the way was a very clear goal. It wasn't a vague one. I want to start a podcast. It was, I want to start a podcast around adrenaline and instinct and talk to people that thrive in this space. That was a motivating kind of subject line for me. It wasn't just a vague, I'll start a podcast someday. The next is assess the challenge level. So goals should be hard, but they should be achievable. So for instance, from last year, building a home, starting a podcast, getting married, those are all things that for me was, they're big things. They're things that took a lot of self-control and took a lot of planning and execution. But they were very achievable. If I ticked the box next to all of those other dominoes, then the end goal was achievable. So that was one. So you got to make them hard, but achievable at the same time. And then break into milestones. So that was kind of the part of, okay, we have a home that we have equity in. We know we have to sell it. When's the right time to sell it? We have, now a property here. How do we get this property ready? How do we do the planning around the actual floor plan, how we want to build it, who we want to build it with? What do the finances look behind, during construction when you're paying an extremely high APR versus when you actually get in and the rate drops. So there's so many different kind of milestone pieces in there. However, the part that he talks about is really like using the reward system that we have. So rewarding the steps, not the end goal. So as we checked these boxes, as we went through, it was celebration. Hey, we got the equipment for the podcast. Like, this is a big moment. Let's check the box. You get that dopamine hit. You're celebrating something that you had success. So progress is the most important when it comes to this stuff. It's not the end goal. It's really the process that you need to be rewarding yourself. Then I think tracking progress measurably, so using metrics, not just feelings, is something he talks about pretty heavily. And I think for me, it was like the goals that I had were pretty easy to track metrics in. It was building a home. There's very key steps that the bank makes you take, the builder makes you take, all of the above. So those were easy to follow and almost set up for us. But the starting of a podcast was definitely a bit a bit harder. It was the first, we got the equipment. All right, now what? We record my first episode. Awesome. Now I have to edit it. Awesome. Now we have to post it. Now we have to promote it. Now I have to find the next guest. Now I have to find the next 12 guests. And that was where it was measurable, but again, there was a lot of kind of metrics throughout that piece, or a lot of milestones to gauge whether or not on. And then with engagement, I think was really more or less the metric that was easy to manage. So what kind of engagement was I getting on these episodes? We uploaded number 1 and it got 300 views. That was good. I want episode 2 to be at 3 to 350 and kind of keep going from there. So those are all kind of ways to really manage, I think, those goals. And it is, almost exactly the way that I try to set up my goals. And I think the other one that's like a really important one is asking yourself, like, what do you really want? It's like you're not making a goal for someone else to look at after you achieve it and be proud of you. It's what am I setting for myself to excel me and my family forward, or me and my interests forward, or what is when it's all kind of said and done, if you can't post something about it on Instagram, or none of your friends ever knew you even achieved this goal, that you would still be impressed with yourself, satisfied, happy. Those are the kinds of goals that I think are really good to set. One of the others, and I'm going to jump right back to kind of my 2025 goals before we jump into 26. And it's really going to be around I think it was, and this was kind of a personal topic, and I'm not going to get too deep into it, but it was the finding balance at work was my goal. And I then kind of had to boil that down to, like, what does that actually mean? Like, is it happiness? Is it time? Is it work-life balance? Is it the expectations that they're setting at work? And it was one, and this is when I was working still at 509. And, in the industry that I had dreamed of being a part of. And it was something I was finding where it's like, my stress levels are through the roof. I'm feeling disconnected with these sports that I have pretty much made my entire life around, the dirt bikes, the snowmobiles, all of that sort of stuff. And I'm asking myself, like, why am I not happy right now? Like, I should be ecstatic. And the part that really kind of boiled it down was, for myself, it was that I wasn't able to operate the way that I really wanted to operate. Not, and I want to like put a disclaimer there that that's not like due to 509. It's, I think, more due to like the industry as a whole. For snowmobiles, when it doesn't snow, people don't buy snowmobile stuff, and that hurts the dealer, and then that hurts the OEM with reselling and all of that. And you were constantly battling this like game of ethics versus sales, and constantly hearing the stories of like these dealers not being able to place the orders they want to place and needing the snow that never came. And then when the snow did come, it was too late. And there was always something that was putting kind of me into this position where it's like I had to pick, like, do I want to hit my number this year, or do I want to make sure that this dealer stays open in years prior or years down the line? And like, luckily, I was able to still do some like really creative things that I think helped. Like, for instance, one of them was, we had a bunch of oversold product in the US, and Canada had a surplus of inventory. And the way that that kind of works, I won't get too far into the weeds, but at that time it was a distributor in Canada. So they own their inventory. It's not like an inventory warehouse that 509 as a brand can pull from to serve the US stuff. So what I ended up having to do was basically got them to agree to a buyback where we purchased the inventory that we had a negative in, that we knew we needed. We had sales for already, but we just didn't have the product to fulfill them, and was able to bring back, as I think close to 300 or 400 grand worth of product to bring back then to sell. And, the US wasn't even my territory. However, it was something that, really did help the company. And like, that was an area where I was able to be really creative and ended up, getting recognized for that later. But it was just one of those where it's like, it constantly felt like it was like behind the eight ball and responding and reacting. And I didn't have that like proactive planning piece that, somebody like myself really kind of needs and wants to keep stress levels and expectations in check. So that ultimately led to me basically leaving the industry. And that was a big one where it's like, yeah, 5-year-old me would have been pissed at myself, because that was always my dream, was to kind of be in the industry and live in that. And finding that it actually took me further away from doing the sports and hobbies that I like loved. And I realized that like doing them meant a whole lot more to me than being in the industry and selling them. So that was one where, ended up leaving and getting back into software sales, which is where kind of most of my career was built from. And like immediately finding that it's like, oh yeah, my love for dirt bikes never was gone. It's here in full effect. And, I'm drooling at the thought of going riding when I can next. And the love for that came back. The love for snowmobiles came back. The want to be doing those things and talking to people about those things came back, which is really why this podcast kind of came to be. As far as an idea, was I wanted to keep those conversations alive. I wanted to use the contacts that I had, from being in the industry to, be able to kind of carry on those either, industry topics, questions, conversations, or be able to talk with the athletes that, just are able to provide this amazing viewpoint on what they have going on, how their mind works. So that was kind of the point of, I was able to get out, but then kind of learn that this love is still here. And I actually really still wanted to have that dialogue, but just on my own terms. So that was my kind of jump back to the last 2025 goal that, was a difficult one to choose, but it was kind of a goal that benefited myself and my wife and our relationship and my sanity and my mental health and all sorts of things like that. So that was another one where it was like, it was a big sacrifice, but it was a goal that I set. I didn't really at the time understand that that's how that was going to go. But I'm really happy I made the decision I did. So as we jump into 2026, this is kind of where I'm going to share the, more or less the general gist of what I have going on. And then I would love for you guys to either leave a comment here on Spotify, on YouTube, or shoot me a message on Instagram and let me know what your 26 goals are, even if it's just one or you have a few. And I want to try to kind of hold as many folks accountable as possible. And I want you guys to hold me accountable, because I think at the end of the year, I want to do a recap just like I did today. Really just showing like, hey, here's where we are. And it's cool to not hit some of them. I mean, some of these are going to be really hard to manage, but I think at the same time, it's like, as long as I'm seeing progress in those, they can become a multi-year goal. It's just, depends on what. So to start off, personally, this is kind of my number one goal, but like, I want to start a family. I want to have a little ripper, whether it's a little boy or a little girl, little hunting partner, little something that I can, really just, again, pour all the love into and raise up and kind of, again, like the area that we live right now is an area that I think like I dreamed of living in when I was young, and being able to share that and like, coach a kid through the learning of all of those different types of sports, life lessons, things like that was always a dream of mine. I'm like one of 6 kids. I'm from a big family. I think kids are always in the plan, but that's one that I think this year it's kind of one of those shit or get off the pot situations. So that's on the list now. I want that to be the case or in progress, which can be kind of fun progress, if you know what I mean. The second goal, so this one's going to be more around health and wellness, but I want to race a enduro mountain bike race. I want to race hard enduro, so Silver Kings hard enduro this year. And then what that means is basically I started maybe 2 months ago, but I want to basically be in fighting shape for those events, to be able to hang in kind of the area that I know I can perform in if I'm in shape. So if that means, dropping 20 pounds or just making sure I'm following a pretty decent training plan around being able to confidently put, a few days worth of hard enduro on my body and a bike come June. Or I think the enduro that I'm thinking of racing, there's 2 actually. There's one at Silver Mountain for mountain bikes, and then there's another one that's over in Beacon Hill, which is over in Spokane, Washington. And I think both of those would be really fun to jump in on and try to kind of put my best foot forward. So those are 2 that I have kind of a big goal for. The next, and this is kind of an easy one, but more around the health side or fitness side, but I want to shoot my bow at least 5 times a week. And that means, that can be an arrow, that can be 100 arrows. Generally, I'll ramp up as we get closer to season, but for myself, I think making sure that I am in, the best shape I can be for those races, and then going into elk season in September, is going to be very important to me. This year, I felt like I was almost like hunting to train, or where I'm like getting fitter throughout the season, where I felt like, maybe those first couple weeks of season, I could have been able to hit harder if I really did, more of the work on the back end. And I think being able to be more aggressive in those situations is going to yield more success. Even though we were quote unquote successful this year, I have a slightly different idea of how I want to be successful next year. But I think that's really going to start with making sure that I'm again, in the gym at least 4 days a week, and then really trying to make sure that I'm complementing that with um, a lot of time on the mountain bike and a lot of time on the dirt bike. Uh, I dare I say, 2 to 3 times a week. Yes, right now, but I'm still going to kind of work that process out in my head as far as like making the actual milestones of where those go. Um, the next goal is a specific one for Silver Kings, but I want to get top 50 in A. I was able to do that 2 years ago. I didn't race it last year. So I think that being a goal this year, being a couple years down the line, I think would still be a really good one, an achievable one, but still really hard. Um, and then I have a couple specific ones for the podcast. Number one, I wanted to launch on a different platform. So on YouTube, we'll still obviously 100% be on Spotify, but YouTube just allows for some of those other folks that don't use Spotify to be able to get in front of the content, which I kind of took it upon myself. So we are already on YouTube. And I think the next evolution of that goal is going to be being able to provide video to my my podcast. So that could be kind of a host. I don't think everyone is going to have video, but I'm definitely going to try to at least get 50% of them to have some type of video option. And then I think also branching into doing some vlog style kind of day in the life videos. And again, I have no background or skill in like video editing, so it's probably going to be like a bear with me situation. But for that, I think it would be a really good learning opportunity for me to be able to kind of start learning how some of that filming works, and then being able to share, because I think on the average, we end up doing so much stuff that, I think a lot of folks would really care to kind of come along the journey with, whether it's just our rides that we go on, the hard enduro, just getting messed off in some deep drainage, where we're going 5 miles in a couple hours. That kind of stuff, that kind of banter. It's like, you really don't know what it's like unless you're there, or someone's bringing a camera in and kind of bringing you on the journey. And then I think with that as well, on the side of actually like prepping for hunting and the different shoots, we have a ton of these 3D shoots that are super fun. I mean, you can see them on all sorts of YouTube and different things like that. But I think giving my own little flavor to them, and, again, with where I live, I mean, we can do so much in one day, whether it's downhill mountain biking at the local resort, or, going on a awesome hard enduro ride after, to floating the river, to shooting my bow, right here in the backyard. It's like, there's so much stuff I can do on a daily basis that it seems like getting something out there. I think folks would dig it. But again, let me know your thoughts on that one. The next two is, I want to post, so at least a new episode. I'm going to say 2 times a month, but I think realistically, I'm going to call it more or less like 20 episodes this year. So in 2026, I want to increase the amount of episodes. I want to have a couple repeat guests, because I think hearing how some of their years went is going to be really awesome, because I know some of them achieved some amazing things. So I would love to have that on. But again, I think I'll branch out. I want to have some more around the different kind of segments of the industry, being able to talk with athlete managers, people that are kind of at the helm of some of these companies that are making the decisions of who's bringing people on, the marketing decisions, the all the different product decisions. I mean, there's so much that goes into these different industries, and oftentimes these companies are a lot smaller than I think a lot of people think. So I think that would be able to be an awesome kind of topic. And then, of course, bring on some awesome athletes that are able to share their thoughts, perspectives, and just get a cool read on people that are doing some really awesome stuff. So that is my kind of quick 26 goal guide. I'll try to create a little bit more of like a post on what these are with more of like the breakdown. Again, to keep myself accountable, I want to push hard on some of these, and I want to really, I want to make sure that, we're coming in and we're swinging, and I'm giving, this podcast the best fighting chance to be successful. But also at the same time, I want to make sure that, you guys are getting the content you deserve and you want. So please engage, interact. Again, I'd love to hear it. So with that, I'm going to cap it. This is going to be episode 1 for 2026 for Adrenaline and Instinct. Hope you guys are ready. Buckle up. We got a lot more coming. Cheers.